Okay, continuing on with 3.51b, using the square root property, what I have to do is get the squared term by itself and then take the square root of both sides. So I am going to subtract 1 from both sides. That gives me x squared is equal to negative 1. Take the square root of both sides, and I get that x is equal to positive or negative square root of negative 1. Well, by definition, the square root of negative 1, so this tells me that x is equal to positive or negative I. All right, for C, I have x minus 5 squared equals 20. I still have something squared on one side, so I'm ready to take the square root of both sides. So this tells me that x minus 5 is equal to the positive or negative square root of 20. Now I can go ahead and break down 20 now. 20 divisible by 2 is 10, divisible by 2 is 5. So this tells me that x minus 5 is equal to positive or negative 2 root 5. If I add 5 to both sides, I get that x is equal to 5 plus or minus 2 root 5. Okay, for D, I've got to get the x minus 3 squared by itself. So I'll start by subtracting 7 from both sides, which gives me negative 2 times x plus 3 squared is equal to 10. Now I'll divide by negative 2, and that gives me that x plus 3 squared is equal to negative 5. At this point, I'm ready to take the square root of both sides. So this gives me x plus 3 is equal to positive or negative square root of negative 5. Well, I know I have to pluck out the I, so this is positive or negative I root 5. And then when I subtract 3 from both sides, that gives me that x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus I root 5. Oops. Okay, last one. Same thing as this one. I've got to get the x minus 5 by itself. So I'm going to start by adding 7 to both sides. That gives me 3 times x minus 5 squared is equal to 19. Divide by 3. And I get x minus 5 squared is equal to 19 over 3. So now I'm ready to take the square root of both sides. So this gives me that x minus 5 is equal to positive or negative square root of 19 over 3. Well, this becomes the square root of 19 over the square root of 3. If I multiply it by root 3 over root 3, then I get this is the square root of 19 times 3 is 47. 27. 57. Sorry. Okay, so this becomes x minus 5 equals positive or negative square root of 57 over 3. And lastly, I add 5 to both sides, which gives me x is equal to 5 plus or minus root 57 over 3. And I'm sorry, there's not enough room on here. Okay, the next problem asks us to solve by completing the square. Okay, now remember how we do that. I'm going to first move the constant over. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And when I do that, if I have x squared minus 2x, I'm going to leave some room to complete the square that equals 4. Now to find out what goes in here, I take this and divide it by 2, which becomes negative 1, and I square it, so this becomes plus 1, and of course I have to do that on the other side as well. So my left side factors into x minus 1 squared, notice this is what I put in here, is equal to 5. I take the square root of both sides, and that gives me x minus 1 equals positive or negative square root of 5. If I add 1 to both sides, that gives me my final answer of x is equal to 1 plus or minus root 5. Okay, well, I'm going to start out here. I don't like this negative, so I'm going to start out by multiplying this entire thing by negative 1. So that gives me x squared plus 2x minus 4 is equal to 0. Okay, then I'm going to move this over. So that gives me x squared plus 2x is equal to 4. Oh, and I'm so sorry. I apologize for that. Okay, so to complete the square, I cut this in half, which is 1. And when I square it, that's what I add to both sides. So this factors into x plus 1 squared is equal to 5. I'm ready to take the square root of both sides. And that gives me x plus 1 is equal to the positive or negative square root of 5. I need to move this up a little bit. When I subtract 1 from both sides, that gives me x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 5. Okay, let's do some quadratic formula problems. Oh, we've got 2 more of these. Okay. All right, well, I'm not done with these yet. Okay, and I can tell already I need more room. Okie dokie. So let's see. If I have 4x squared minus 12x plus 9 equals 0. Okay, what do I do first here? Well, let's see what I'm going to do first. I am going to, well, I'll move the 9 over. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to move the 9 over. So that's going to give me 4x squared minus 12x is equal to negative 9. Now, before I figure out what goes in here, my leading coefficient has to be 1. So that means I'm going to have to divide everything by 4. So that gives me x squared minus 3x is equal to negative 9 over 4. Okay, so to figure out what goes in here, I'm going to take this and divide it by 2, which gives me negative 3 halves, and square it. So that gives me 9 fourths, and of course I have to add it over here as well. So this factors into x minus 3 halves squared is equal to 0. Well, I really don't have to take the square root of it, because if it's equal to 0, then that tells me that x minus 3 halves is equal to 0, or x is equal to 3 halves. Okay, for D, let's see if I can do this where I have room here. I don't know if I will or not. I'm going to add 14 to both sides. So I'll try to write smaller. So x squared minus 9x is equal to 14. Yeah, I'm not going to have enough room. Okay, so let's see what goes in here. I take this and cut it in half, which gives me negative 9 halves. And when I square that, that gives me 81 over 4, which I have to add to both sides. Okay, so this factors into x minus 9 halves squared is equal to, and I'm going to have to get a common denominator. So I'm going to have to multiply 14 times 4 over 4. So that becomes 56 over 4 plus 81 over 4, which gives me a total of 135 over 4. Now I'm ready to take the square root of both sides. So this becomes x minus 9 halves is equal to positive or negative square root of 135 over 4. Okay, well, what do I notice here? I notice this can become the square root of 135 divided by the square root of 4. Now, the square root of 135 is divisible by 3. So 135 divided by 3 gives me 45, which is divisible by 3, which is 15, divisible by 3, and divisible by 5. I also know that the square root of 4 is 2. So this becomes x minus 9 halves is equal to positive or negative. I can pull out a 3. 3 root 15, and the square root of 4 is 2. Oh, this is not that bad. All right, so I'm going to add 9 halves to both sides. So this just becomes x is equal to 9 halves plus or minus 3 root 15 over 2. Or, since I've got a common denominator, I could write it as 9 plus or minus 3 root 15 over 2. Either one is absolutely correct. Okay, I think we'll quit here and start a new video for 3.6.